Rất vui được gặp lại quý vị và các bạn trong chương trình Tôi và Việt Nam trên kênh truyền hình FBNC. Và khách mời của chúng tôi ngày hôm nay xin trân trọng giới thiệu ông Sandeep Rakhet, hiện là tổng giám đốc của tập đoàn quảng cáo Grey Group tại Việt Nam. Hi Sandeep, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So what brought you to advertising industry?
One of the things that brought me was, actually if I look back, I'm the sort of person who likes to do different things every day. And the passion of advertising is that, I do something different every day. So, one day I'm dealing with a cell phone client. The next day I'm figuring out ways to sell shampoo. The third day I'm looking at how to sell cars. So, it's so interesting as a profession. Every day, I'm excited about something. So that's one of the reasons that brought me to advertising.
So you don't want to do the same thing every day?
I am not the sort of person, I get bored easily.
So how did you end up in Vietnam then?
I work for Grey Global Group, which is a multinational company. We have offices in 92 countries. I worked with Grey for over 20 years across various countries like, in London, in India, in Thailand. So a part of my job was to come and look at Vietnam as the most dynamic offering in the Asian market.
Okay.
And set up the office about now 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
6 years ago.
So when you got here in Vietnam the first time, how was the market at that time for advertising?
I think the Vietnamese market really looked at advertising from about 8 to 9 years ago. There were all the big multinational companies. There was, a focus on the belief that we must advertise, to get into the global scheme of things. A lot of global players were looking at Vietnam. But what was happening was there was a very traditional form of advertising, right? The traditional form of advertising and what used to happen in the 1990s.
What was it?
There was only print media,
Okay.
and there was only television media. So advertising agencies were doing a little bit of print and a little bit of television, and everybody was happy. But the world was changing very fast, right? So today, it's a completely different story. I think Vietnam is one of the markets in the world that wants to try everything.
Okay, so multimedia, right?
Yes. I mean, across consumer engagement, consumer entertainment, consumer, interaction. So which is, you might call it below the line, you might call it 360 degrees, but digital, So, it's taking very, very big steps, which is very exciting because, to tell you truly, this is one of the most exciting markets to be in the world in terms of advertising because it's growing so fast.
Sure.
And, you can do new things here that, sometimes in developed markets, you cannot do.
I mean, coming to a new market, exciting, a lot of opportunities. But for Vietnam at that time, how long does it take you to, get the first client?
We're actually the global agency for British American Tobacco and Procter & Gamble. So when we come to a particular country, we already have them as a client.
Okay.
While you have a global client that is 90% of your business, you must also acquire locally based clients.
Okay.
Right? Because if you understand the local market, you understand the local consumer, you are able to contribute more to your multinational clients as well. So if you look at it, our first big client, local client, it took us about 8 months. But our first big local client was Vinaphone.
Okay.
And
That's a big one.
I'm talking about the biggest. Of course, there were other, smaller clients, but I think Vinaphone really, really paved the way for Grey to become a force in the local market.
Well, Vinaphone is actually a state-owned enterprise at that time.
Yes, still is.
It's a big client.
It still is. It's part of VNPT. So and especially because Vinaphone was a telecommunications client. It's a mobile service provider. That's the sort of client that touches the life of every consumer in a country. They have a saying at VNPT, saying, the milestone, from 0 kilometer to 0 kilometer across any town in Vietnam is defined by a VNPT post office.
Yeah.
And that's where Vinaphone is.
But with another competitors, the mobile phone also belong to VNPT.
Yes.
But it's a different story, right?
Yes.
We just work for Vinaphone.
We just work for Vinaphone.
Okay. What do you do to make them choose you as at their advertising agency?
They have a very intensive pitch process that we call. In some places, it's called a tendering process. But basically, they called about 6 big agencies. They gave us a brief. At that point of time, they were launching 3G in Vietnam. They were also looking at how the Vinaphone corporate brand would be perceived in the future.
Okay.
So 6 agencies made presentations to them on strategy, on creative work above the line, which is television and print, and you went further to even see how the retail space for Vinaphone was going to work. So across this, we made presentations. It was Vinaphone's decision to go with who they thought was the right partner or the right fit.
So, and how long have you been working for Vinaphone?
We've been now working for Vinaphone for 3 years.
For 3 years.
Yes.
And what do you think is the biggest achievements in terms of advertising impact that you created?
I think if you look at when we released the 3G campaign, the numbers for Vinaphone, they were the 3rd largest then. I think the awareness numbers went up of who, because Vinaphone, everybody is already aware of Vinaphone, but the likability, because advertising creates desire. A lot of people make the mistake and come and ask me saying, why is my product not selling? Advertising is not about selling. That's a salesman's job. Advertising is about creating a desire in the mind of the consumer to want to buy that product. So Vinaphone's likability, but what I was most surprised, across most of the mobile phone operators, Vinaphone is the operator that actually sells what they call the most number of value-added services.
Okay.
The usage of value-added services across Vinaphone is very high. So that was what 3G did. That is what 3G is supposed to give you. It is supposed to give you value-added service, and that's one of the big achievements. We also won the best film that year, the best television commercial for
the TVC.
The TVC, that's right. We call it affectionately in the agency the whistling TVC.
Okay.
There was a reason for that whistling TVC. The reason was that, as a telephone company, while you also deal in value-added services and you deal in SMS,
okay,
you also deal in voice because you talk to people.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big recommendations was, as a telecom company, you don't have a sound. Because, when you're doing communication is about touch, it is about seeing, but it's also about sound. And whistling is something that an everyday consumer on the street can do every day. So, when you hear a whistle, and when you hear the Vinaphone whistle, oh, that's a Vinaphone commercial. You don't even have to look at it.
So that's brand recognition.
Brand recognition, right? Yeah.
Cùng nhau cuộc sống thêm ý nghĩa.
But would that make it easier for you because Vinaphone is already a big brand? Would that make the job easier for you?
Yes, it does. It does make jobs easier. But what happens in terms of big brands sometimes, very, very big brands, whether you talk Coca-Cola, whether you talk Nike, whether you talk Apple, Vinaphone, which is one of Vietnam's biggest brands, people get bored with big brands.
Okay. See it all the time. So.
Yeah, across the world, people get bored.
Okay.
It's such a big brand.
All right.
You want to try something exciting. But if something exciting comes from a very big brand, then you again become interested and follow the brand. And I think that's what happened to Vinaphone.
Okay.
That's the reason why Apple says, oh, today there is an iPad 2, there's an iPad 3. They're always in the news.
It's always new, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, and we come back with that after a short break. Thank you. Thưa quý vị, vừa rồi là phần 1 của chương trình Tôi Việt Nam cùng với cuộc trò chuyện cùng với ông Sandeep Rakit, là tổng giám đốc của tập đoàn quảng cáo Great Group tại Việt Nam. Mời quý vị giải lao trong ít phút trước khi quay trở lại với phần 2. Xin chào mừng quý vị quay trở lại với phần 2 của chương trình Tôi và Việt Nam cùng với cuộc trò chuyện cùng với ông Sandeep Rakhet là tổng giám đốc của tập đoàn quảng cáo Great Group tại Việt Nam. Hi Sandeep, welcome back. So we've been talking about you know advertising Vinaphone, which is already a big brand,
Yes.
but you're getting bored in the customer's mind, and that's not an easy thing to do to try to make it more exciting. So how did you do it?
We adopted what we call new strategies for Vinaphone. We created a mascot, which people got to see. We created a sound, which was constantly in the people's minds. Vinaphone gave us new products that we had fun around with. So just keeping Vinaphone top of mind in the consumer's mind was the strategy that we adopted.
Well, right now as Vietnam's, in the world generally, we are in the times of economic slowdown. Would that affect your strategy of business?
Yes, a lot of people like to call economic slowdown recession.
Okay.
Does it slow down business? Yes, it does. But there are two things that happen in a recession. Consumers buy products anyway in a recession. For example, today if you have a headache, you're still going to buy Panadol for that headache, right? If your baby needs milk food, you will still have to buy that milk food, right? What consumers forego in recession is something called luxuries, right? They think twice about luxuries.
Okay.
But in a recession, what I believe is that brands have to work harder rather than slower. Because what happens is, a consumer, when he chooses a brand, one brand over another in a recession, he looks for value in the brand. Which brand is giving me more value?
Okay.
Whether Pepsi is giving me more value or Coke is giving me more value. Is Samsung giving me more value or is Nokia giving me more value? Now, whichever the brand that actually can communicate to the consumer that we are giving you more value is the brand that will win in a recession. So the brand themselves have to work harder to convince the consumer that they are better value, right? So that's one thing that actually happens in a recession. The other thing about, is there a business slowdown? Yes, because there's a lot of categories like real estate, cars, which require consumers some time to think about their decision.
Okay.
So that thinking process in a recession becomes slower. There are impulse products like tomato sauce or biscuits that you will buy, they're thinking half a second. But to buy a car takes you at least 20 days, 30 days, 40 days to think. Or to buy a house, it takes you maybe a year to think.
Okay.
That process gets delayed. That's why there is a slowdown. But, will advertising carry on even in a recession? Yes. Will advertising have to work harder in a recession? Yes. Do we have to work harder to find solutions for our clients? Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's more exciting in a recession for an advertising agency than, in normal times. In normal times, you can do normal advertising.
Just have to work harder, right?
You have to work harder.
So how does the development of technology affect the behaviors and the attitude of customers nowadays?
Technology over the last 10 years has changed the world. Today we have a saying in the agency that there is something called the I generation. We like to call it the internet, iPad, iPhone, iPod generation.
Fan up, man. That's all Apple products.
Yes. But in a way, what has happened is, from traditional advertising, internet changed the world. Traditional advertising was where the manufacturer was telling the consumer, buy this because it is best. The internet changed the world to say, when the manufacturer said, buy this, it is now best, and communicated that, the consumer came back with a question, saying, now you tell me, why do I have to buy it? What is so good about it? Now, that was a big shift, because now you are engaging with the consumer. The consumer was talking back, right? I think what has happened over the last 1 year or even 1.5 years with things like Twitter and Facebook and consumer today is even going beyond engaging with the brand. It is now asking to be a part of the brand. Now, the consumer sometimes is responsible for creating the advertising, is sometimes responsible for creating the brand. You know, they come back today to an iPhone and say, these are the sort of apps we want. The other thing that has happened is, blogging. That today is a very powerful tool.
Sure.
It has become a completely different advertising world where there is a little lack of control. And it's how the messages that, because today, before there was only one message that went from a brand. When there is blogging, there is 5,000 messages from a brand.
Yeah.
Today, you release a video, within 20 minutes, it will be up on YouTube. That is a complete dramatic shift in how advertising has.
You can do that for advertising too, right?
Yes, we can. But the consumer will take that video and put it on YouTube. He will immediately see a commercial and tweet on Twitter saying, oh, I like this. Oh, it's very bad.
So you get feedback right away.
You get feedback like in a second.
It's good for you too. Well, so in Vietnam, I know that you had experience in many Asian markets before coming to Vietnam. So is there unique features about Vietnam's market in terms of cultures or in terms of the consumer behaviors that you found out in Vietnam's market?
Unlike most Asian markets, where Asian people are a bit sentimental, a bit emotional, the Vietnamese people are very value-conscious people. They've asked a lot of questions of brands to convince them. But on the other hand, because it is such a young and dynamic generation here in Vietnam, unlike aging countries, there are aging countries like Thailand, or even China is aging today. India is aging. Japan is the best example of an aging country. The Vietnamese consumer likes trying new things. The experimentation with new things is absolutely, great for a consumer economy. So Vietnamese, very value conscious, very pragmatic, very practical, but yet wanting to try new things. So that's what's exciting about Vietnam.
So what kind of lessons that you can learn from other markets that you can apply in Vietnam?
I think one of the biggest lessons people make a mistake on is saying, oh, I'm Vietnamese, and I'm Thai, and I'm Singaporean. There is a global idea. Idea can be global. Execution can be local.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. There's a very interesting thing from Procter & Gamble on P&G from Ariel, or Tide, that mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws have a competition between themselves for the same man.
Okay.
The son or the husband.
Okay.
It can be competition, friendly competition, but there is competition because two women are in love with the one man,
Okay.
the wife and the mother.
Okay.
Now, that idea is global. It can work in any market. But how it will be executed from a Vietnamese insight point of view, or how it will be executed from a UK point of view, or an Australian point of view, a Thai point of view is very different.
Okay.
So the execution can always be local, but the idea has always to be global. So that's how Vietnam is similar in a way. I think what also happens is understanding each consumer or understanding insights from consumers is a scientific process in advertising. And that's what you bring from other markets, the knowledge of how markets can change, how people adopt things, how you want to communicate things, what is going to work, what is not going to work. For example, India is very big on arranged marriages.
Oh yeah.
Right? So one of the biggest sites in India is a site called wedding.com because that's where they do it.
Yeah.
Is that same principle going to apply in Vietnam? Maybe, maybe not. But People get married in Vietnam, they meet each other.
Okay.
Now, you have to do it in a particular way that is not the Indian way, but the Vietnamese way, you know. So, you know, there are social networking sites, there are chat sites, people are meeting each other.
They do. Right. So thank you. Let's take a break and we'll come back with that later. Thank you. Vừa rồi là phần 2 của cuộc trò chuyện với ông Sandeep Rakit, là tổng giám đốc của tập đoàn quảng cáo Grey Group tại Việt Nam. Mời quý vị giải lao trong ít phút trước khi quay trở lại với phần cuối của chương trình. Xin chào mừng quý vị đến với phần cuối của chương trình Tôi về Việt Nam cùng với cuộc trò chuyện với ông Sandeep Rakit, là tổng giám đốc của Grey Group Việt Nam. Sandeep, welcome back. Well, I know that Grey Group has something called Eye on Asia. So that's a kind of report that you use to get more information about the market.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about the report?
It's a research that we do every year across 14 countries in Asia. To understand the consumer, what is happening in the consumer space, what is happening in the advertising world, how to communicate to them. The reason why we do it is we started this about 7 years or 8 years ago. We were the only agency to do this, actually. Why did we start it? You know, you looked at the United States of America and you said, that's the greatest consumer economy in the world. It's 250 million people. Now you look at Asia. Which economy is going to grow and why do we have to understand them? There are 3 billion consumers in Asia. 1 billion in China, 1 billion in India, 1 billion across Asia. Now, even if you take 2 billion and throw them out of the window, you still have 1 billion people, which is 4 times the size of the United States. So you have to understand them. You have to understand what drives them, how do you communicate to them, what do they want, right? So what we do in Eye on Asia is we go across these 14 countries and we do individual researches in this country. Okay. We meet with consumers, we talk to them, we have one-on-one interviews, we do quantitative interviews, and we find out what motivates them. Now, for example, a part of Eye on Asia will be Eye on Vietnam, which is very, very Vietnam specific. Like, Eye on Malaysia will be very, very Malaysia specific, Australia. Now we collate all these findings in and say, this is the Asian consumer as a whole. A Vietnamese consumer is what we do Eye on Vietnam for. It's got very popular with clients and with people asking us to do. A great example of Eye on Asia is how the Asian mother is different from the Western mother.
How different?
Now, all mothers love their children. They don't love their children less, not even in the West and not even in Asia. But, the Western mother has her own career. She has other things to do, which, her friends, she has outside social life, The Asian mother is a very different mother. She is so involved in her child's upbringing, what is the child eating, where is she studying, has to do well. In fact, it has come out in a very nice book which actually took the United States by storm. It's called The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. It's one of the books, that shows the Asian way of parenting. But the Asian mother, when the child does well, if tomorrow, if the child says, if the child grows up and becomes a doctor and becomes famous, or even comes first in class, comes first in sports, it is the achievement of the mother. That is her ambition. Okay. So to understand, things like that, let's say put it into milk food communication or talk to mothers about their babies, becomes a very important aspect.
Okay. So, as a consumer, I'm very curious whenever I see an advertising or a TVC. I'm just wondering, how much of it is the truth? What do you have to say on that?
It's an interesting question. I think advertising, true advertising, is only about the truth.
Okay.
Advertising cannot lie. It should not lie, right? Because if you are looking at consumer insight, if you know what the actual consumer wants, if you are offering up the benefits of your product, that is the story you need to tell. You can tell the story in a very entertaining and creative way. You can tell much like you go and see films, for example, right? Okay. But you can tell advertising can never be fiction. It has to be the truth, because ultimately the consumer will catch you out. And once you are caught out in a big world stage like advertising on TV or on the net, it can have very bad repercussions for your brand. Now, why do you say truth in advertising? At one level, advertising is an art, where it is creative, which is where the entertainment part of advertising comes. But the other part of advertising is it's a science. The science to understanding a consumer. What we do is good advertising speaks the language of the people. Now, what people are telling us, we are feeding that back in, understanding it and putting it in an entertaining way, right? That's why you have consumer insights, you look into research, you look at understand what consumer attitudes are, what consumer lifestyles are, how they use things. That's what advertising does. Advertising basically collates all the opinions, puts together a very simple consumer insight. The more simple you make it, the better, and then presents it in a very entertaining way to the consumer. It's never about lies. If there is lies in advertising, then people don't know how to do advertising.
So have you ever failed to meet a client's expectation that you couldn't close a deal?
Of course.
What happened?
There are clients that come and tell us, or say this message in a particular way because I believe my brand is this. It is the duty of every advertising agency to tell the client, maybe the consumer does not think of your brand in such a way.
Okay.
They think about it differently. So let's present it differently. What you think of your brand and what the consumer thinks of your brand is different. We tell people what the consumer is looking for. Now, there's a very interesting client a very long time ago in another country.
Okay.
He went on and on at me saying, this is the way you want to do it. And I said, fine. I am your consultant. You pay me lots of money. At least hear my point of view. It is your money. You spend it the way you want to. But because you are paying me money, hear my point of view, which might be good for your brand. If you still decide against it, then go ahead and do it. But that is the difference. That is the difference. Why do you listen to a doctor? You know your body best, right? But there is a doctor who comes and tells you certain things. Why do you listen to an accountant or a tax officer? Because you know your money best. But a tax officer enhances you, or an accountant, chartered accountant enhances you. A doctor enhances you. That's what we are like. We tell them on what the solution is. The health check is. That's what we do.
Then how do Vietnamese clients or Vietnamese businesses that you already talked to, how well do they view the need of the brand development?
I think the Vietnamese market is becoming very, very dynamic. If you look at around you, there's a lot of branding or rebranding of Vietnamese clients that are going on. For example, Bao Viet. Bao Viet did its whole rebranding, changed its whole vision, its whole
Financial
culture.
company.
Yeah. We are looking at VIB Bank, looking at FPT, Vinaphone. I think Vietnamese clients are looking to say, how can we, we've done things a certain way for the last 30 years. Because Vietnam as a country is so forward-looking, saying, how can we look forward to the next 30 years? And a lot of Vietnamese clients are actually engaging a lot with us and discussing and how further we can develop their brand and communicate their brand. I mean, there have been great successes in Vietnam. I mean, Vina Milk, for example. TH Milk, for example. These are Vietnamese brands that have, over the last 5 years become very, very big brands.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge in Vietnam when doing advertising in Vietnam?
The biggest challenge is how the market will develop in terms of digital, in terms of PR, in terms of television advertising. What happens in developing markets? Everyone is so, tries to get ahead by doing things quickly. You look at short-term solutions. A brand does not get built tomorrow night. It takes time for brands to build. It takes time for reputations to build. You cannot do quick fix solutions. And I think that's what the Vietnam advertising industry, it has to get expertise. It has to believe in the long term, and it has to push solutions in a very focused manner. Because the consumer, while it's changing, you have to give your brands a shape and time.
So what could happen to a brand if they try to speed up the process and try to cut off the time and do it quickly without any proper executions on the brand development? What could happen to a brand?
It's like a person. You can injure a person, and if you start bleeding little by little, you're going to die. But if you look after your body well, you can live longer. Everybody knows that. Brands are the same. Brands are people. Brands are like people. You have to nurture them, you have to feed them, you have to grow them, and you have to look after them and care for them. That's what you need to do.
So what do you think the advertising industry is heading to in the 21st century?
It's an interesting question. It's possibly one of the most interesting questions even the world of advertising is trying to answer. I have a very simple answer for it.
Okay.
We used to say, the future is coming. The future is already here. That's what has happened. Today, like I said, today, you're already in 1 minute on Twitter, you're in 5 minutes on Facebook, Google+, YouTube. I mean, even before you can tell what the future is, the future has come to you in a second. So that's where the world is heading to. The world has to learn how to cope, with all these multiple messaging communication forums and how best to understand and utilize them as a communication medium. There's no more only print, only TV, only outdoor billboard. There is different messaging forums, and different messaging forums need messaging that is relevant to the consumer. For example, a Twitter message can be this short, but a television message can be 30 seconds. That's
all right. Thank you so much for sharing, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having
Quý
me.
vị, vừa rồi là phần trò chuyện với ông Sandeep Rakit, là tổng giám đốc của tập đoàn quảng cáo Grey Group tại Việt Nam. Và đến đây thì chương trình Tôi Việt Nam cũng xin được khép lại. Một lần nữa, cảm ơn quý vị và các bạn đã quan tâm theo dõi. Hẹn gặp lại quý vị và các bạn trong chương trình kỳ sau. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.